Patrick Jane is the type of guy to drink tea at a crime scene. There's a lifeless body sitting on the floor and a room full of people barely managing to hold themselves together. And he chooses to wander off and explore the room and make a cup of tea and lie down on the couch. The show plays it off as if it's this kind of quirk that he has because he's such a genius. But in my opinion, it's one of the most philosophically loaded things that he does. And honestly, it might be unintentional. Because once you see what's underneath that facade of Patrick Jane, you cannot unsee it. And I'm here to show you that. Let's start with that tea ideology where he just goes and drinks tea on an active crime scene. Because in my opinion, everything starts with that tea. Jane knows he cannot control the crime. He understands that he cannot control the grief that comes from the crime, or the killers, or the loss that he is carrying that never leaves him. All of the separate different things. What he can control is his attention and his response. And in that sense, he has decided that with total clarity, as a matter of fact, he made the decision to put himself on the side of what is actually his to exist. Now, this is this is Stoicism. Precisely Stoicism, not pretty much. This is a Stoic mindset. Not the gym or the cold shower or the run in the morning kind of Stoicism that's been sold to you, but instead the actual real one. Marcus Aurelius wrote over and over in his private notebook that you have power over your mind, not over the external events, and that realizing this is where all the genuine strength of a Stoic comes from. Patrick Jane doesn't need to quote Stoicism to be a Stoic, or at least live through a Stoic ideology. He just lives in it in his own rumpled waistcoat and at the worst scene in the entire room. Now, the Stoics, they had a word for what Jane was aiming at. It was apatheia. Apatheia, I'm always strung on how to pronounce it, but it's along those lines. It looks like apathy, but it is not apathy. It means that freedom is ruled from your passions, not from the absence of feeling, but instead from the refusal to be dragged around by that thing. And if you've watched The Mentalist, that is pretty much Patrick Jane entirely. And why it's more than a character trait is what I'm going to go in through here. The calm itself is the armor that Patrick Jane wears. He lost his wife and daughter to a killer that's been haunting him for the rest of the show. And the composure that he wears is welded almost directly over the wound that killer left on him, right? The stoic surface and also the grief underneath are not two separate or different things about him. Instead, they are the same fact playing different roles. He is calm because for him the alternative has no bottom. That is not a party trick or a TV show gimmick. That is what Stoicism itself actually costs. And it's shown honestly on a network crime procedural and honestly through some comedic tones. But to move on, you think about the couch, the naps, the wandering around the room, the wandering around the crime scene, trying to figure things out, the taking of the MP3 player, right? It is his refusal to be rushed by anybody ever. That is almost a completely, no, not even almost, that is just a completely different philosophy running at the same time. And in my opinion, it can be most attributed to Epicureanism. Epicurus is slandered commonly as the philosopher of indulgence when what he taught was actually the opposite. And it's funny because Stoicism and Epicureanism, a lot of people don't seem to think that they go together. A lot of the times, Lucius Seneca himself, one of the, I wouldn't say fathers, but one of the most accredited geniuses of Stoicism, commonly says that he doesn't want to borrow from Epicurus, but he does because he's so wise. Now, Epicurus taught us this, right? Pleasure is mostly the absence of disturbance. And simple things such as a warm drink or a quiet hour of isolation are more than enough. And that the good life itself is not about getting more things, but instead needing less things, needing and relying on less and less. When Patrick Jane decides that a murder investigation is a perfect time for a nap, or that a crime scene is a perfect place to go wander around and have fun, he's not being flippant. Instead, he's refusing to allow the horror of the crime scene set the temperature of his own nervous system, his own brain, his thinking, his mind palace, as he calls it. What he found is the small pleasure inside of the catastrophe, and he chooses to guard it on purpose, on his own terms. That is completely Epicurean discipline, instead of seeing it as laziness. Now, there's one more fact that defines him a lot more than other facts do, or a lot of thought processes do. He used to be a self-acclaimed liar. He considered himself a fake psychic. He doesn't believe in it, of course, so he made money from it, but he didn't believe in the art. So he was a fake psychic. It's undeniable in the show. He stood on TV stages, he stood in front of the general audience and told grieving, genuinely upset people that he could contact their dead family or their dead relatives or anything in that sense. And he was so good at it that he became famous. And somehow every word of that entire process was a con, and Jane himself knew that. The entire man that exists after that fact, however, is built as a war against exactly the belief he used to sell. He used to make all of his living on. He knows and he debunks and he exposes all of this psychic facade and walks into a room thick with certainty, but tells himself that he's not a psychic still. He acts as if a psychic would, but he denies the complete existence of psych. I was going to say psychicism, but that's definitely not a word. I can't think of the word right now. But basically, due to the fact that he knows from the inside how belief itself is manufactured and how desperately people want to be fooled, he also understands how dangerous it is to manipulate people that way and to make money off of it. This is, in my opinion, considered philosophical skepticism, one of the oldest positions in philosophy that there is. It is the same thing as David Hume asking you what you actually have evidence for, insisting upon a claim that only earns its belief in proportion to the proof behind it, telling you that it has nothing as long as it has no evidence. Patrick Jane, basically all he does is accept what he can observe, and he tests. And he does nothing else. And the show constantly, episode after episode, puts that thought process behind a pressure. It puts it under an ice wall, which is constantly melting and getting thinner and thinner. It continues offering Jane the warm lie, the afterlife, the idea that his family that he misses is somewhere and that he might see them again. Yet he chooses to refuse it almost, if not every single time. And he would rather hold a cold and sad truth of grievance than a comforting illusion, because he used to sell the comforting illusions and he knows exactly what those illusions are worth to the people listening to it. That is not cynicism in some sense. It's instead, I think it's an epistemology, if that's the right word that fits here. I think it's that held under the most personal pressure imaginable in any sense, because he himself has felt what he is doing to other people. And then there's also the reason that he does any of the work he does, the quest behind it, I guess you could call it. Like I said, his wife and daughter were murdered over, I guess you can't say nothing, but there was no inherent reason. It was slander against a murderer's name. So therefore he punished him for that. It was just an act of pure cruelty by a man who wanted Patrick Jane's attention. That is, in my opinion, I keep saying in my opinion, that is just meaninglessness in its rawest form. There is no justification behind it. It's the universe delivering the worst possible thing in the worst possible scenario for no reason or no purpose at all. And Patrick Jane's response to that is the interesting part behind it. I think it's probably the part that a lot of people overlook, because it's pretty relative to Friedrich Nietzsche. He was handed a void. His wife and daughter were killed, and he was responsible for it in a sense. And instead of being destroyed by that void, he built an entire self around the pursuit of the thing that broke him. He generated his own reason to keep living out of a world that had given him no reason. Friedrich Nietzsche had said that a man who has any why to live, a man who has any why to live can bear any how. So Patrick Jane manufactured a why out of the wreckage, and it was dark. It is dark, and it almost consumes him every single case. It nearly consumes him every day that he lives. It's shown throughout the show. Yet it's also the same thing that keeps him alive, which in my opinion is the whole point. There we go again, in my opinion. Now, there is one more thread that ties all of the others together, because right now we're just taking philosophy after philosophy after philosopher. Like, we're just grabbing strands. We're taking random things. Patrick Jane, he manipulates people pretty much effortlessly, and he can do so because he treats human behavior as a readable, as a caused, as a predictable set of levers rather than a mystery. Most people will look at someone else and think, what are they thinking? How could I ever understand the depth that the other person is going through right now? But Patrick Jane takes a pretty hard deterministic view of human nature, and instead of arguing against it, he demonstrates it to almost everyone around him. Scene after scene, he's doubted upon. No one believes him until everything comes into fruition. Yet, from the start, he was predicting exactly what people will do, and every single time, it seems as if he's always right. So put the strands together. If I take your hair and I pick it apart strand by strand and lay it out, it's obviously not going to make sense. You're not going to be able to tell what kind of haircut you had. But I want you to put it back together. Take the stoic control of the self. Take the Epicurean guarding of the small pleasure. Take the skeptical warfare on the comforting beliefs and the Nietzschean purpose forged out of meaninglessness. Take the determinist's, read on human behavior. Take all of those philosophies, take all those ideologies and put them together, all of them held at once, consistently by one character across 7 different seasons, and you don't get a philosopher. You get Patrick Jane. He's not a philosopher. It's undeniable that it's a TV show and he's not meant to be a philosopher. He's just a consultant and self-acclaimed. He's a consultant who solves murders on CBS. That's the whole TV show. But he lives more coherent philosophy per episode than most people manage to exist in through their entire lifetime. And Patrick Jane does it while drinking tea on a stranger's couch and listening to music off of a dead person's MP3 player. Sorry. The calm was not the absence of the pain for Patrick Jane, but instead the only thing left that is his. And the most philosophical thing about that entire thing, the entire character behind him, that is it. The way he doesn't think deeply, but instead thinks efficiently. The fact that he took the very worst life he had, the worst life that a person can have, their entire family being slaughtered due to their actions, and instead he built, from out of the wreckage, from out of everything, a way of living that actually holds. That is Patrick Jane's philosophy. So understand that most philosophy never ever gets tested that hard. Most people who claim themselves to be philosophers never actually live a life that gets tested. Instead, they live a life that is comfortable, and philosophy really does hold up well in a vacuum. So understand that Patrick Jane, while not being a philosopher, also was one of the greatest representations of philosophy on TV. To this day, every single episode.